Welcome to the Office of Special Education's presentation on the Student Planning System's new placement document for the fall of 2018. The goal of this presentation is for participants to become familiar with the formatting and new features of the placement document in SPS, as well as to be able to use the document to make placement requests through the Office of Special Education. The new placement document in SPS replaces the old LRE document that was used to make placement requests through the Office of Special Education. It is also no longer a requirement that an RTI document be completed prior to being able to create a placement document. While the RTI document is not a technical requirement any longer to create a placement document, many schools may want to continue to utilize the current RTI document found in SPS to track student responses to interventions and to use as part of their body of evidence meeting with their zoned OSE specialist. The new placement document will be utilized for making placement requests resulting from the following reasons. Students who are currently in BCPS who will be moving to a different portion of Baltimore County and who require the same program in that new location will use a direct transfer reason. Students initially identified through a child find team and who may require the support of a regional program will be identified on the placement document using the child find option. Students currently in Baltimore County Public Schools who may require a less restrictive setting than they are currently in, or a more restrictive setting, or who may be in one regional program and the IEP team needs to consider a different regional program, can use the less, more regional to regional option on the placement document. Finally, the new placement document will be used to track all progressions of students. School staff will utilize the same method for creating new documents for students when creating a placement document for a student. School staff should search for the individual student for whom they would like to create a placement document. Once the school staff is within the screen for documents for that student, they should click the down arrow next to Create New Document and select the placement document. The new placement document in SPS will have 5 sections plus a background information section. The background information section can be found at the top of the placement document. Information in the background information section will automatically be generated by SPS using information found in the student's profile. Section 1 of the new placement document is where staff will identify the reason that they are making the placement request of the Office of Special Education. There are 4 different options that staff can choose from. These options were previously explained earlier in the presentation. It is important for staff to note that only one reason can be chosen for the request. Additional questions are created within the placement document based upon the reason that is chosen for the request in Section 1. Also, please remember that regional to regional means that the student is currently in one regional program, but the IEP team is going to be considering the student to move to a different type of regional program than they are currently in. Section 2 of the new placement document is the section in which school staff will identify the specific program or programs that the IEP team wants to consider for the specific student. Questions in Section 2 are generated based upon the reason for the request that was chosen in Section 1 of the document. If the reason was for more, less, or regional to regional in Section 1, the words more, less, or regional to regional will appear next to each program that is being requested. The words more, less, and regional to regional are based upon the student's current program that they are in. Section 3 of the new placement document is used solely by the Office of Special Education staff who is processing the placement document. In this section, Office of Special Education staff will identify potential sites of service based upon the program or programs that were requested by school staff in Section 2 of the document. Section 4 of the new placement document must be completed by the school-based IEP team immediately following the completion of the IEP team meeting in which the placement of the student was discussed. Section 4 notifies the Office of Special Education staff that a placement decision has been made for the student. If the IEP team determined that a change in placement is necessary, then school staff should place a check mark on the line that contains the program service delivery model with the school location for the service delivery model that was determined by the IEP team. School staff should note that the options for programs and locations in Section 4 of the placement document come from the options that were identified by school staff in Section 2 and sites of service that were offered by the Office of Special Education in Section 3 of the placement document. If the IEP team was unable to make a decision on the placement request at the IEP team meeting, then they will enter the team meeting date and answer no to the question asking if a change in placement was determined. If the IEP team is still pursuing the potential change in placement, they must schedule the next IEP team meeting date before the end of the current IEP team meeting in which the placement is being discussed. The school staff should then answer yes to the next question, asking if the IEP team will be pursuing the requested change at the next IEP team meeting. School staff will then enter the date of the next IEP team meeting into the next box that appears. If the IEP team is no longer pursuing a potential change in placement, school staff should answer no to this question. Staff will then have to use the drop-down menu that appears to choose the reason for why the placement request is no longer being considered. Section 5 of the new placement document is completed entirely by Office of Special Education staff following the completion of Section 4 by school staff. Section 5 of the new placement document ensures that the entire placement process has been completed for the student. A direct transfer request can be made using the new placement document when all of the following conditions are met. The student must be currently enrolled in a regional program within BCPS, and the family must be moving to a different location within Baltimore County, with the student requiring placement in the same type of regional program based upon the new address that has been provided. If those conditions are met, then school staff should check the first box next to the word Direct in Section 1. After checking the box for Direct, please enter the new contact information for the student in the remaining boxes in Section 1. Once school staff has completed entering the new contact information for the family in Section 1 of the direct transfer request, they should go to Section 2 of the document and review what the student's current educational program is. Remember, the current educational program for the student is automatically entered into Section 2 based upon the information found in the student's current profile in SPS. The IEP chairperson should then answer the question about the student's health needs and enter their name and finalize the document. If you check yes to specific health needs that warrant specific building requirements for the student, a text box will appear in which information needs to be entered, explaining what those specific health needs are. Once all the information is complete in Section 2, the IEP chairperson should then electronically sign and finalize the placement document. The Child Find option in Section 1 of the new placement document should only be used for students in which a Child Find team has found the student eligible for services and the team needs to consider a potential placement into a regional program for the student. After school staff checks the box for Child Find, they should enter the contact information for the student into Section 1. After entering the student's contact information into Section 1 of the placement document for the child find request, school staff should then go to Section 2 of the placement document and answer the questions to identify the specific programs that the IEP team may need to consider for placement of the student. The IEP chair should answer the questions about the student's health needs as well, and then enter their name onto the placement document in Section 2. Once all questions have been answered in Section 2 for a child find placement request, the IEP chair should finalize the document and then electronically sign it so that it goes to the Office of Special Education for placement considerations. When an IEP team needs to potentially consider a less restrictive, more restrictive, or regional to regional placement option for a student, school staff should use the third checkbox in Section 1 under the reason for request that states less, more, regional to regional. Staff will then answer the questions in Section 2 of the document to determine the difference between less, more, and regional to regional requests from Section 1. In Section 2 of the placement document for a less, more, and/or regional to regional program request for a student, the student's current educational program will automatically be populated based on the student's profile in SPS. School staff should then answer the first question about whether or not the IEP team is requesting a specific program. If school staff answer yes to this question, drop-down boxes will appear for school staff to then identify specific programs. As school staff choose regional programs from the drop-down menus, the words more, less, or regional to regional will show up next to each specific program. The words more, less, or regional to regional are based upon the student's current educational program that is listed in their profile in SPS and compares it to the program on the specific lines that school staff have chosen. After answering the question about considerations for specific programs in Section 2, the school staff should then answer the questions about public separate day school options and private separate day school options that the IEP team would like to consider for the student. Please note, the public separate day school options are broken into two separate questions. The first public separate day school question involves consideration of the White Oak School. If the answer is yes to consideration of White Oak, then a drop-down box will appear immediately under that question in which school staff will identify a regional program at White Oak that the IEP team would like to consider. The second public separate day school question involves consideration of Battle Monument, Maiden Choice, and/or Ridge Ruxton. The last question in regards to programs or schools that the IEP team would like to consider revolves around private separate day school options. After answering questions about specific programs or types of schools that the IEP team would like to consider in Section 2, school staff should then use the discussion box to enter the specific strengths and needs of the student, as well as an explanation as to why consideration is being given to specific program options. School staff should also list the name of the OSE specialist with whom they are working in reference to this student. The OSE specialist listed in Section 2 of the placement document must electronically sign the placement document after its finalization for any request involving a more restrictive option or a regional to regional option for the student. As with all other types of requests using the placement document, School staff must answer the question as to whether the student has any physical or health needs that warrant specific building requirements. If yes is checked for this question, then staff must manually enter in the explanation in the discussion box as to what those specific needs are for the student. Once all of the questions have been answered in Section 2 for a less, more, and/or regional to regional placement consideration, the IEP chairperson should enter their name in the box next to IEP chairperson. The IEP chair should also enter the school principal's name and answer the question as to whether the school principal is aware of the placement being requested. Once all information has been completed on the placement document for the less, more, or regional to regional options, the IEP chairperson should finalize the placement document and electronically sign it so that it is submitted to the OSE specialist for their signature if needed, and the OSE placement office. At the current time, it is anticipated that the placement document will be used for progression requests for all students who meet the following criteria. Students who are in a transition grade level, for example, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, kindergarten, 5th grade, or 8th grade currently, and who are currently in a regional program and or will be progressing into a regional program. Please keep in mind the purpose of today's presentation is to allow you to become familiar with some of the types of questions that will most likely be asked in the placement document in regards to progressions of students. However, today's presentation is not going to answer specific questions in regards to the process that needs to be used for progressions. There is an extensive amount of knowledge that needs to be understood in order for progressions to happen in a smooth manner. A future IEP chair meeting will be held that will focus on the process that will be used for progressions for all students in BCPS. Potential topics at that meeting will include lists of logical progressions for each special education program, information about OSE specialist signatures and their requirements for progressions, reports that will be utilized by IEP chairs during transition times, scheduling progression team meetings for students, and completing Section 4 of the placement document for progressions will occur at that future IEP chair meeting. When utilizing the placement document for the purposes of progressions, SPS will identify the current educational program for the student in Section 2 of the placement document. Please keep in mind the current educational program is generated based upon what is in the student's profile currently in SPS. SPS will then attempt to identify the logical progression for the student based upon their current program. School staff should then answer the question as to whether or not the student is most likely to progress to the logical progression listed above. School staff can identify additional potential programs that the IEP team may want to consider by checking yes next to the question that says, are other potential progression placement options likely? Once school staff check yes to that question, a drop-down box will appear in which additional programs for consideration of the IEP team can be listed. School staff should also answer the questions as to whether consideration of public separate day at White Oak or public separate day at Battle Monument, Maiden Choice, or Ridge Ruxton is being considered for the progression. The final question in regards to programs or placements for progression of the student is whether or not private separate day school is being considered for the progression. Just like with all other placement document requests, School staff must answer the question as to whether or not the student has physical or health needs that warrant specific building requirements. Please remember, if you check yes to this question, staff must enter an explanation into the dialog box as to what those specific needs are. School staff must also provide an explanation as to why specific programs or school placements are being considered for the progression of the student. School staff should also list the name of the OSE specialist who is assigned to their school. The IEP chair should then enter their name and the school principal's name and answer the question as to whether or not the school principal is aware of the placement being requested. Once all the information has been entered into the placement document for the purposes of progression placement, the IEP chair should finalize the placement document in SPS and electronically sign it so that it is submitted to the OSE specialist for signature if necessary, and so that it will be received by the OSE placement office. It is anticipated that school staff will begin using the new placement document in SPS beginning on November 1st, 2018 for all placement requests other than progressions. However, the exact start date for using the new placement document will be shared via an SPS announcement closer to November 1st, 2018. Please remember that additional information in regards to student progressions will be shared at a future IEP chair meeting. We hope that you have enjoyed this presentation and look forward to working with you in the future.